My name is Liz Logan. I'm the Tribal Chief of Treaty 8 Tribal Association, and I'm going to be reading the declaration that we brought down to this Premier and this government this morning, September the 19th, 2010. Unfortunately, the Premier and his government were not there. They basically sent us a letter saying that they would not be in attendance to receive it. But here is the declaration. It's the declaration of the Doig River First Nation, Halfway River First Nation, Prophet River First Nation, West Moberly First Nations concerning the proposed Site C Dam on the Peace River, British Columbia. Whereas we, the Denizah people of the Doig River First Nation, Halfway River First Nation, Prophet River First Nation, and West Moberly First Nations are the original Indigenous nations of Northern British Columbia who have a unique historical and spiritual and cultural link to the land. We have occupied the Peace River Valley and its tributaries, the Athabascan and Mackenzie watershed region since time immemorial, and continue to occupy this land. Our ancient and sacred sites and graves of our ancestors are found throughout the Peace River Valley and its tributaries. And whereas we have inherent constitutional rights to continue our way of life in the Peace River region, we are signatories to Treaty Number 8, a peace and friendship treaty between the Crown and each signatory First Nation. We are stewards of the land who face industrial devastation to the land. And in Treaty Number 8, the Crown and First Nation agreed that the First Nation signatories, and this is in quotations, have the right to continue with our way of life for as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the rivers flow, without forced interference, as though we had never entered a treaty. And the rights provided for in Treaty Number 8 are constitutionally recognized and affirmed by Section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982. And whereas the province of British Columbia proposes to construct and operate a major hydroelectric dam called the Site C Dam on the Peace River that eliminates our ability to continue with our way of life or exercise our treaty-protected constitutional rights to hunt, fish, and trap, and harvest, and carry out our traditional practices on the land. Construction and operation of the proposed Site C will, among other things, have direct and cumulative impacts that, but are not limited to the following: disrespect and destroy the graves of our ancestors, eliminates critical warm lowlands where both predators and prey survive harsh northern winters, demolishes habitat and disrupts migration routes for bull trout and other fish species at the top of the Peace River aquatic food chain, and cause them to become contaminated with mercury that poisons the traditional foods of First Nations, as happened already behind the Bennett Dam, already impacting our homeland. It annihilates the islands of the Peace where cow moose deliver their calves. It submerges key ungulate calving grounds for moose, mule deer, and elk. It eliminates regionally rare and important ecosystems, including old-growth deciduous and mixed wood forests of the Peace, Halfway, and Moberly rivers, riparian forests important for fur bearers, habitat for red and blue-listed neotropical migrant birds, and traditional and medicinal rare plants. It destroys more than 7,000 acres of Class 1 and Class 2 farmland, along with it, the opportunity for food security in northeastern British Columbia, and also other lands that are eliminated by erosion. Together with the reservoirs created by the two existing dams, it creates a cumulative barrier for fish and wildlife, especially grizzly bear, movement at the narrowest waist of the continentally protected and important Yellowstone to Yukon wildlife corridor. It exacerbates the negative environmental impacts caused by the first two upstream Peace River dams to the Peace Athabasca Delta and other wetlands down the Peace, Athabasca, and Mackenzie River that flows into the Arctic Ocean. It adds 142,000 tons of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere as a result of this dam project, which this government has dared call green and clean. It eliminates the very land upon which our people hold annual cultural camps to maintain the heritage of our relationship between our elders, our youth, and our land that is our duty to pass on to our future generations in a healthy, vibrant state. And whereas the proposed Site C Dam will have harmful environmental effects that will impact on First Nations and all residents in the Peace region or downstream, and whereas it is in the interest of all British Columbians that the Peace River and its tributaries be preserved for future generations, and whereas we, the chiefs of the 4 First Nations gathered with affected nations located downstream of this Site C Dam, along with several environmental organizations, and concerned citizens of the BC region met at a summit on September the 16th and 17th in Fort St. John, British Columbia. Therefore, we, the undersigned chiefs, on behalf of our respective First Nations, call upon the federal government, who has a fiduciary obligation to all the First Nations potentially affected by this proposed Site C dam, to protect and safeguard their inherent Indigenous rights and way of life. And we, the undersigned chiefs, on behalf of our respective First Nations, call upon the Premier and this government of British Columbia to support and adequately fund a full, independent, comprehensive, cumulative assessment with the pre-industrial baseline of the proposed Site C dam on the Peace River region and the Athabasca and Mackenzie Delta, including a full environmental and cultural assessment of the impacts of the two previously constructed upstream dams and how it will continue to impact and affect the treaty rights and interests of our First Nations. We call on this government to support and adequately fund a full, independent study of all viable alternative options for the production of electricity for this province's needs. We call on this government to halt any and all efforts of the proposed project until the completion of these full, independent studies have been done. And we finally call on this government to reinstate the authority of the BC Utilities Commission to examine the true economic impacts to the people of British Columbia for constructing the Site C dam. And furthermore, in recognition of the impact that this proposed Site C dam will have on the local environment, our way of life, and our ability to exercise our rights, we, the undersigned chiefs and supporters, on behalf of our respective First Nations, declare that 1. We are opposed to the proposed Site C dam, and we vow to use all lawful means to stop the Site C dam from proceeding, and we assert that the proposed Site C dam is not green or clean. And this declaration was signed off by the Chief of Doig River, and that's Chief Norman Davis, the Chief of Halfway River First Nation, and that's Chief Ed Whitford, the Chief of Prophet River First Nation, that's Chief Lynette Tekoza, the Chief of West Moberly First Nations, and that's Chief Roland Wilson. And their signature in this declaration was signed also by the following First Nations. They are also opposing Site C, and they are the nations that are in Alberta or the Northwest Territories. And they are, again, McLeod Lake Indian Band, Drift Pile First Nation, Sucker Creek First Nation, Swan River First Nation, Little Red River Cree Nation, Duncan's First Nation, Denethaw First Nation, Tall Cree First Nation, Sturgeon Lake First Nation. And the following First Nations are in support of this declaration, and that's the Decho First Nations in the Northwest Territories, the Luxagood First Nation, and the Yellowknife Dene First Nation. That is the declaration that we brought down to this government, to which they were not there to receive it, but we will be nailing it on their door. Thank you very much for listening.